Today's video is made possible by Hulu Plus. For a free extended 2-week trial, head over to huluplus.com/TLD. Hey guys, Jonathan here with TLD. If you guys remember, a while back I did a comparison of the current generation baseline Crystalwell MacBook Pro, which features only Intel Iris Pro integrated graphics, and I compared that against the previous generation Ivy Bridge baseline MacBook Pro, which had dedicated GT650M graphics. Now I'm back with a comparison of those two models against the next tier up GT750M equipped MacBook Pro, which is also based off Crystalwell. Now before we jump into the actual performance, let's go ahead and compare the current generation MacBook Pros as far as pricing and what you actually get with each model. So for about $2,000 US, it's going to get you a 2 GHz quad-core i7 CPU, 8 gigs of RAM, and 256 gigs of PCIe-based flash storage. And like I mentioned previously, you only get integrated graphics with this model, no dedicated GPU whatsoever. Now for around $2,600 US, let's go ahead and see what that extra $600 gets you. So for this model, we're looking at a faster 2.3 GHz quad-core i7 CPU, twice the RAM at 16 gigs versus 8, and twice the storage at 512 gigabytes versus 256 on the baseline model. Now in addition to the Iris Pro graphics, you also get a dedicated GeForce GT750M with 2 gigs of video memory. Now it's interesting, if you actually go and configure the baseline model, it's essentially like Apple is giving you the 750M, because if you notice, you bump up the CPU, you double the RAM, you double the storage, you're at that same price of $25.99, except there is no 750M. So I'm not sure why Apple would allow you to configure it this way, but regardless, if you are considering doing this, don't just jump up to that next tier, because you're gonna get all this plus the 750M. Now jumping over to performance, as we noted in the previous video, the Crystalwell Iris Pro only MacBook Pro held its own very well against the previous generation 650M Ivy Bridge MacBook Pro. Now as you can see, the Crystalwell GT750M MacBook Pro outperforms both of those with a multi-core score reaching nearly 14,000. The single core score wasn't as big of a difference, which is to be expected, but regardless, you can see it does outperform those two models. Jumping over to Cinebench R15, the previous generation Ivy Bridge MacBook Pro actually outperformed the Iris Pro Crystalwell MacBook Pro, but you can see the 750M MacBook Pro actually jumps on top of both those with a score of 603. Following that is Luxmark 2.1, and this is going to test OpenCL performance. This was actually pretty interesting as far as the results go. If you take a look at the 650M only, that scored around 144 K rays a second. If you jump up to the 750M, it wasn't much better, which comes in around 149. And if you notice, the Iris Pro actually outperformed both the 750M and the 650M. So the beauty of this model is not only do you have the 750M, but you have Iris Pro as well. So if you notice that last line of 847, that's actually what happened when I combined the Iris Pro plus the 2.3 GHz Crystalwell CPU, and that got the highest score of around 847 K rays a second. Next up is Unigine Valley 1.0, and this is going to test gaming performance. So you can see the Crystalwell Iris Pro only MacBook Pro kind of suffered a little bit here not having a dedicated GPU. The 750M slightly outperformed the 650M, but you can see there really wasn't a huge difference between the 750M and the 650M in this specific test. After that, we're going to take one more look at Cinebench R15, this time the OpenGL section, and we're looking at average frames per second. Now here you can see there's actually a pretty decent improvement from the 750M versus the 650M, and again, both clearly outperform the Iris Pro only integrated graphics on the baseline Crystalwell MacBook Pro. Next up is Dirt 2, and this was tested at 1680 by 1050 and 2880 by 1800. Now I'm sure by now you can start to see there's a theme developing as far as gaming goes. The 750M is just a little bit better than the 650M, and both of these clearly outperform Iris Pro as far as gaming goes. Next up is Blackmagic Disk Speed Test, and you can see both Crystalwell MacBook Pros, both the $2,000 and $2,600 model, perform very similarly, and both are a significant improvement over the Ivy Bridge 650M MacBook Pro. Following that is a 10.5 gigabyte file duplication. This is going to actually show you what those previous numbers mean in terms of real-world performance. Again, you can see both Crystalwell MacBook Pros are very similar in performance, and are both significant upgrades against the previous generation MacBook Pro. Next up is the Driver Heaven Benchmark version 3.0. We're looking at Photoshop CC, and here you can actually see the Crystalwell 750M MacBook Pro outperforms the other two by a pretty significant amount. Following that is Aperture 3.5. What I did was take 10 raw photos, convert them into JPEG at 50% the size, and you can see all three models perform very closely here, with the 750M MacBook Pro just coming out slightly on top. We'll go ahead and jump over to Handbrake, the 64-bit edition, and what I did was take a 1-minute MKV file, transcode that into H.264, and you can see the Crystalwell 750M MacBook Pro outperformed both models, but not by a whole lot in this specific test. Jumping over to iMovie 10.0, what I did was take a 3-minute 1080p project and export that. You can see there was around a 4-second improvement over the baseline Crystalwell MacBook Pro, and around 11 seconds over the previous generation 650M MacBook Pro. Jumping over to Final Cut Pro 10, this is where I saw a big difference with the 750M MacBook Pro I took a 7-second H.264 clip, retimed it down to 50%, stabilized it, added optical flow, and you can see the 750M MacBook Pro did that task much faster than both the baseline Crystal Wall MacBook Pro and the previous generation 650M Ivy Bridge MacBook Pro. Moving on to more Final Cut Pro 10 tests, I took a 45-second H.264 clip, applied a blur, and again you can see the 750M MacBook Pro outperform the other two models by a significant amount. In my last set of Final